Hey, Aaron Rabinowitz here for Red Giant. In this video, we're going to take a look at Universe Glitch, a plugin that creates the look of compressed video with glitching, as seen over poor internet connections, bad video encoding, corrupt data streams, or through broadcasts with not enough bandwidth. It's a simple and great way to make your video look like found footage or low-quality YouTube video compression. It's also very useful for creating glitchy text and logo treatments. Now, Glitch, like every other plugin in Red Giant Universe, is available for After Effects, Premiere Pro, Final Cut Pro, and more. I'm going to be looking at it right now in Premiere Pro, but we'll also look at it in other host apps as we go along. Universe Glitch is made up of primarily three effects. That is compression, small glitches, and wide glitches. Let's take a look at compression. It's the simplest of the effects. So I'll set that to 0 for the small glitches, and I'll set the wide glitches to 0 as well, so we don't see them. And as you can see, if we dial up our compression, we get lossy looking video. And if we dial it down, we get crisp video. Now, another interesting thing is if I turn up my compression here, and I'll bring back some of my small glitches, and I turn on compression last, this puts compression at the end of the effect chain. So basically what's happening is, whereas compression was being applied first, so it was being applied to the footage and then glitches were being put on top, when you turn on compression last, compression is applied to the entire effect stack last, so that small glitches and wide glitches are included in the compression. Really helps create a very messy and compressed look. I'm going to shut that off. Before I go any further, I just wanted to make note of the fact that while there is a lot of control within the effect, you have a bunch of presets to help get you started. Now you'll notice that some of these are for footage and some of these are for text. They'll work with one or the other, it's just that text gets a little messy when you're working with compression. It's hard to read, whereas video looks pretty good when it's compressed if you're trying to create a compressed effect. So, it's a good place to start with either of these. You can always turn up compression if you use one of the text presets, or you can start with one of these and turn compression down if you're working with text. It's all in what you want to do with it. Just for a moment, I'll turn on one called Data Strips, which I think is pretty interesting. And as you can see, there's a lot of neat stuff going on in here to help really sell a messy, compressed data loss. Let's reset the effect and go back to the first frame. Next, I'm going to turn off compression, just so I can look at the small glitches. Also turn off the wide glitches. By the way, another way to turn off the glitches entirely is to use this glitch frequency property. This is a great way to control when glitches are shown. If you don't want to see any glitches at all, set this to 0 and keyframe it. If you want to see them 50% of the time, this will make that happen 50% of the time. And if you put it to 100%, you'll see glitches pretty much 100% of the time. Okay, looking at our small glitches, let's scroll this down. This is the control for how many glitches we have. I'll bring that up a little bit, and we'll go into our small glitch settings. Now you'll notice we have our blending mode for color. This just controls the way in which the glitches transfer to the image below them. So right now we're using color. If it's set to none, there would be no color being added to the image. If we set it to something like difference, we get a really nice inverted sort of effect. There's also exclusion and screen, which will brighten the image with the color. And finally, the normal blending mode, which just brings the color to the layer without actually bringing the pattern of the image into the glitches. I'll reset that and bring that to color. Now another thing you'll notice here is we have saturation. If we turn it all the way down, then the image below the glitches loses its color. If you bring it up a bit, we get some nice saturation. But it gets weird because as we go up to something like 75 or 80 or 90, the glitches seem to lose their saturation. But that's only because the color transfer mode works that way. If we were to go to using the exclusion blending mode, you're going to see something that's a lot hotter. I bring that down to 15, and as you can see, it makes a tremendous difference. Let me reset that and that. The next thing to look at is complexity. And this one's a little hard to show. It's not going to show up all the time. You have basically one level of complexity, two levels of complexity, or three. If I set this up to 3, you might see a difference here. It really depends. So let's take a look through if I can find some nice examples of this. With the complexity down to 1, you can see that everything looks pretty boxy and pretty straight. But when I drive the complexity up, you start getting thinner pieces and little chunks pulled out of some of the other glitches. That's what complexity does. You're not going to see a ton of difference, but it does help create something that looks a little less regular. Let me turn that back to 2. Okay, now our small glitches size works by scaling up the glitches. As you can see, that can make a lot of the glitches disappear from the screen. So if you want to see more small glitches, you're going to need to add them back in with the small glitches slider. So as you can see, we now have a bunch of glitches on the screen. We've made them bigger, but the pattern inside stayed the same size. We'll come back to that in just a second. Now the aspect of the effect stretches it out or makes it super thin, depends on what you're doing. An aspect of 1 is going to build glitches off of a square pattern. So you may not see squares depending on how many glitches you have and depending on your complexity, but it's based off of squares. Because at 1, it's a 1-to-1 ratio. Bring it up to its default of 8 and you get nice wide stuff here. Now this pattern internally is controlled by the small glitches pattern size. So we bring it up and now we've got much less blockiness, just bigger chunks. And as you can see, the image below the glitch effect is actually being displaced, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit as well. Now there's also pattern aspect. If you bring it down, you're squishing it, making it tall and thin, or you can bring it all the way up, and you're not going to see much of a difference like this unless I add more glitches. Like this. Bring in more glitches. There you go. Let me hold down Command key while I'm doing it. Now you can see what's going on here. Now the other thing to note is displacement X and Y. If you've ever used displacement effects, you know that this pushes pixels to the left, to the right, up, or down. X does it left and right, and displacement Y does it up or down. Okay, I'm going to turn the small glitches down to 0, and then let's take a look at the wide glitch settings. So we have our wide glitches. Let's dial this up and bring them back. And you'll notice that there's actually 2 different sets of glitches. There's one that's colored, and there's one that is not colored right now. And we'll take a look in the wide glitch settings and see why that is. So the first thing to note is the wide glitch's height. This controls how tall the effect is and how much of the screen it takes up. We also have the blending mode for it, and we've got color, exclusion, or normal, or none. So none would show no color, or we've got exclusion, or we've got color. And normal, which just brings the color without bringing the background image into it. Let's set it to color for now. We've also got saturation, which you're familiar with. It works the same way as far as which blending mode you're using, so we don't need to go through that again. There's also this thing here called difference glitch. Now right now we're seeing an extra glitch here. This is the difference glitch, only without the difference color turned on. So if we turn on the difference glitch right here, you can see that now we're getting the difference added into the effect, and this creates sort of an inverted color effect. And turn off the difference glitches for now. You can also see we have the pattern size, which controls how tall these lines are. And we can turn off color displacement so that there's no pixels being displaced. And we have difference displacement, and with that off, if we turn these both off, you can see that just the color is coming through and there's no displacement. Now of course, as we covered before, the displacement X will control left and right, right and left, and the same for up and down for Y. Finally, the last thing to show you here is random seed. If you have an effect going on and you just don't happen to like the way it looks, but you like the general behavior of it, you can play with the random seed value, which will give you a different look. It will affect any of the random properties that are taking place to create this random effect. So by doing this, you're changing not just the color or the placement, you're also changing the timing. So for example, if your glitch frequency was set to 50%, maybe on one frame you're seeing it, but if you change the random seed, you might see glitches show up on a different frame. Now, before we head over into another host application, I just wanted to show you some text in Premiere Pro. Glitch does a pretty good job of creating some interesting text effects. Now, the reason I wanted to show you this was because I figure like this. Chances are you're probably going to be working with a lot of white text. And if that's the case, you should really be aware of the way the blending modes work with white. So right now it's set to none, so there's no color going down. But if I were to set this to color, as you can see, there's almost no difference. Just on the very fringes of the text can you see any color. That's because when you're using the color transfer mode over a light layer, you're not going to often see much of that color come through. So if we want to try something else, try something like difference, right? Or exclusion, or normal. And I'll also do the same thing for our wide glitches. I'll set that to normal. Let's take a look at that now. And as you can see, we're getting a lot more color in here. So that's pretty much how you do it. When you're working with white text, chances are you don't want to use the blending mode called color. You either want to work with exclusion or normal or one of the other ones. Okay, next let's look at Adobe After Effects and working with glitch. Before I get started in After Effects, I wanted to make a note about working with effects and shape layers. After Effects text and shape layers have no real dimensions. Since they're dynamic and can be altered at any time, After Effects doesn't know exactly what to do with them when effects are applied. So the bottom line is that most effects don't play nicely with text or shape layers. And you can see that in this example where I have text and I've got the crystallize effect and a 4-color gradient applied. As you can see, as I move the text around, the pattern and the colors don't move with it. It stays as if the text is revealing that pattern. It's even worse in 3D. So if I turn that on there and I do this, you can see that it really becomes a mess. So this is basically the way that After Effects deals with effects that have any kind of pattern that's placed on text. Now I'm showing you that because obviously that's going to affect glitch as well. If I apply glitch to this text layer, you can see that we're going to run into the same exact problem. And if I make it 3D, you can see that it gets even worse. So with that said, what I like to do with text is to pre-compose it. So choose Layer, Pre-compose, and then apply the effect on top of that. Now it gives you a little less flexibility with the text, but it does allow effects, not just glitch, but pretty much all effects that create any kind of pattern or look to the text. It will allow them to work more properly. So you can see now that I've done this, if I move it like this, it moves with it. If I turn on 3D and I make this a 3D layer, you can see it goes with it as well. Okay, now that I've shown you something not that awesome about working with effects in After Effects, I'm going to show you something really awesome about working with them, and that is working with audio. After Effects has native ability to listen to the audio of your layers and generate keyframes. And beyond that, we have a plugin from Red Giant called Sound Keys, which can do much more than just listening to the audio. It can isolate pieces of it and use at will. So let's take a look at some basic use of working with glitch and audio. So I've got an audio file here. This is just a video. You can see we've got the glitch effect going on. But I've got an audio file here for glitching. And let's see if you can hear that. Okay, so what I'd like to do is make glitch get triggered by this glitch sound. So what I'll do is, with this glitch audio selected, I'll choose Animation, Keyframe Assistant, Convert Audio to Keyframes. This instantly creates a layer with keyframes based on the audio. Now you'll see that most of the time these values are going to stay at 0 because the audio is only from here to here. So if we look, you can see they're 0, but then they start to go up. And what I'm going to do is link the frequency of the glitch effect to these keyframes. So I'll alt-click on the glitch frequency and then I'll drag it over to this slider. So now let's see what happens. Now what's happening is the reason we're not seeing a lot of those glitches is because even at its loudest right now we maybe reach 18% with these keyframes, maybe 30%. So what I'm going to do is multiply it by 3. And let's take a look now. So you can use audio to trigger the effects. Okay, now that I've shown you some very simple techniques for working with audio, let me show you how much better it gets when you use Trapcode Sound Keys. Trapcode Sound Keys can isolate specific areas of your audio, which is really helpful if you want to use only part of that audio to trigger the effect. So let's take a look. I've got Sound Keys here, and I've got Sound Keys layer, and I'll make this solo just so you can see it. And right now there's nothing to see. What I have to do is I need to tell it to use the audio layer. We'll use our drums here, and if we watch, just take a look, you can see how there's the kick drum over here and the snare drum over here, and what we can do is we can isolate one of those areas and use that to trigger the effect. I think I'm going to use the snare drum because it happens a little less frequently. So let's take a look. going in here and just waiting for a nice high kick on that snare. What I'll do is I'm going to adjust the audio spectrum and scale it up a bit, just so that when it hits this point, we'll call that our 100% mark. And below that, I just have to make sure it goes to 0, and it does. See, this is anything below this line will be 0. So now we've got a place where we get something. And you know what, I might want to make this a little bit higher because I'm seeing a little bit more. Let's just do this. Here we go. So when we've got our audio coming through this little green section that we've created, you can keep an eye on here and you can see where that's having an effect. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll click on Apply, and this will generate a bunch of keyframes. And if we hit U to reveal the keyframes, we can see them. And what I'm going to do is Alt-click again on the glitch frequency to create the expression and tell it to link to sound keys output 1. And with that done, I'm going to turn off Trapcode sound keys so that we don't see it anymore. And now let's see what happens to the glitching. Pretty cool. Now I also just happen to like to add this expression, the same thing. I want to add it to the number of glitches too. So it's not just that they're there or not, it's that they become less and less of them as well. So I can Alt-click on small glitches, and I've copied, and now I'm just going to paste. And I can again Alt-click on the wide glitches, and I can paste it again. And now let's see what that looks like. Now, if you feel like it's too strong, and I think on the small glitches it might be, I can multiply that by 0.25, so there's less of them. Well, it's a subtle difference, but it can really help if you want to sort of have the glitches ramp up and down along with being visible and invisible. Alright, well, that's After Effects. Obviously, there's much more that you can do with Glitch, and you've seen it in Premiere Pro, but I wanted to give you a look at what you can do in After Effects. Finally, in Final Cut Pro 10, you can find Glitch under Universe Stylize in the Effects area. So just choose Universe Stylize, grab hold of Glitch, and drag it and drop it right onto the footage. And there you go. The controls for it are the same controls that we saw previously, although in Final Cut 10 they don't collapse, so they're all kind of just out there. Anyway, I hope that this helps you in your work. Once again, I'm Aaron Rabinowitz for Red Giant. I'll see you soon.